later on. Thank you very much for coming out this morning. Somebody asked me when's the best time to present at a conference. I still don't know the answer, but I do know that after lunch is not it. So we'll see how this goes first thing. Thank you for coming back. Really busy day yesterday, some great presentations, lots of kind of really dense information, and obviously this is the second day of the same thing. I think I get in at the beginning, so you're not exhausted by the time we give a presentation. So on the off chance that you don't know anything about me, my name is John Renfrew, come from the UK. I was trained as a kindergarten teacher, but specialising in mathematics and creative arts. So I did a lot of dancing when I was at college. And I ran away to join the circus, figuratively. I ended up not teaching, but going to work in theatre and ballet, doing stage and lighting design, and ended up in the music business on tour with people as a tour and stage manager, which is where I first met FileMaker, on a tour bus in Germany, the first ever tour with Mary J. Blige out of America. And the guy I was working for was using proper old school FileMaker, absolutely brilliant. And that was me hooked. I had skills in programming, so I became an AV programmer, Dove, slide projectors, and Dataton. That's before these things existed, like when everything was done on a Kodak. And I ran a business to make the slides and then go and do the presentation, so double bubble, as we call it, get paid twice on the same job. And I ended up doing corporate events, and ended up in the motor industry. I'm not very far from the manufacturing headquarters of Jaguar, now Jaguar Land Rover. So I was fortunate enough to travel the world with them, launching new expensive sports cars. Somebody's got to do that job, and it might as well be me. All the time I was using FileMaker to run the business. I didn't know that a community existed. In those days, we learned from books. The internet wasn't really a thing. Mobile phones weren't. I am that old, by the way. And then since what we'll call some naughty bankers ruined our economy a number of years ago, for which apparently nobody has still gone to jail, I moved out to being a full-time FileMaker developer. And I do a lot of specialised work in higher education, reporting to the government, and I have skills in creating PDFs from code. I've been doing that long before other people were able to, and FileMaker started on it, and things like Node-RED. And obviously now my topic of the day is Odata. So some of you may have seen Odata presentations in the past. I'm not going to teach you about Odata, we're just going to talk about something very specific. And why are we doing the presentation? So I was fortunate enough to be at an Engage in Austin last year, in Clay and Lucy's session, the State of the Union. And Clay talked about the vision for Odata inside the Claris platform. And it was like a light bulb went on in terms of, it isn't just like a thing they've imported and then they're going to leave it alone. It becomes a really important leg of how we access data in the platform. It's going to end up with its own direct funnel straight into the data engine. And that's why we all need to kind of consider it. Now, the things we heard from Wes yesterday, take that further, is actually Claris have worked out that there are ways to use Odata as a transport mechanism between various parts of the system, even potentially between FileMaker Pro and Studio. I'm not going to teach you about it itself, going to assume you might know what Odata is about. And obviously the big thing is, I'm able to do this presentation because it is now here, the latest version, so the things you will see today, you can go and play with at home or later in the foyer. And obviously, the big announcement to go with that as well is the removal of metering. It does still mean that badly behaved web devs can just fill your channel with data in a way that's ill-disciplined. Maybe we just need to supervise them as opposed to let them do uncontrolled things. But we should have been doing that anyway. The basics of Odata, if you haven't seen it or you weren't there, hopefully Fabrice covered some the basics of Odata and some of the whys and why it is a kind of key thing from yesterday. If you have the time, I did just recently do 5 one-hour sessions on Richard Carlton's training TV, and the sessions are now available on YouTube. Even if you play it at double speed, it's still a 2.5 hour commitment, but it's a proper let's start by assuming you don't actually know anything, because the number of people I speak to in conferences who said, oh, I've never played with it yet, is still quite high. So if you want a how to go through things, that's something that you can look at. There's some other stuff coming up in the community in the future, and I'll be speaking at Engage again next year. Or just search on the internet for FileMaker, Odata, and video. Virtually everything that's there is, in fact, me anyway over the last 3 or 4 years. So one of the important whys about Odata, though, is nothing to do with us. People who know nothing about the mad way that we connect our data structures can access them using something that they know and understand. So because somebody can speak this language, FileMaker is now in the same community as SAP and Oracle and SQL and various other data sources. It removes the vendor-specific things from people being able to talk to us. I think we forget that that's a key thing about what Odata is giving us. If somebody knows Power BI, you can go, okay, here's how to get into my data, and you can run some analysis on it. If you have other Odata-specific tools, and you don't know about us, web devs can do the same as well. I think that's a key thing that Odata gives us. It's nothing to do with what we can do with it. It's other people. And obviously the point is, it's independent of context, brackets, except when you're running a script, because clearly that needs to go through layouts, using table occurrences on your graph with basic authentication, and it's just an API. But apart from one specific place, everything about it, it's talking JSON. You can make it talk XML, you can make it talk HTML if you really want to. But the primary method of data transfer is JSON, and we've all grown to love that. And fundamentally, it allows us to separate our concerns, the things that we're doing. So what you will have heard is, it's on the web page, on the front page, Odata now 4.01 compliant. What does that mean? Well, if you read all the paperwork, there are levels of compliance. So that statement is true, but it's not wholly true. It's not fully compliant. It's compliant at the bottom level, a kind of minimal level. There's an intermediate and an advanced level of compliance with the standard. And when you read the documentation, it's a whole list of, oh, you must do this, and you must not do this, but you should do this, and you could do this, and you might do this. They're quite kind of dense. And FileMaker have chosen where they kind of pitch themselves to be able to make that statement true. And that's where you find the documentation. And the simple one line at the top of the documentation is new or improved headers, preferences, operators, and system queries. And clearly behind that, there's a lot of content. So one of the things is that operators, the things that we've normally put a $ in front of, like select and filter, don't need to be there. And I was fully prepared to go, okay, so that's a thing that you could write code and it's not backwards compatible. Only thing is, I did discover it's been backwards compatible since 19.6.4. We've been able to do that all along, just nobody ever thought about it. And I certainly didn't teach people, so I do have to apologize to the community for saying you have to do it this way. You absolutely don't. And a key thing, if I just told you this and walked out the presentation, I think this is enough for today. This is something that is not documented anywhere on the Claris website. There is something in moving from Odata 4.0 to 4.01 which can be a breaking change for your code. If you include $count is true, so as well as the data, you get back a count of the number of records, in version 4, you'd be getting back something which had @odata.count. And you can use that. So I use it to make a query. If the count is 0, it doesn't exist, so I make a record, otherwise I update a record. So I use it all the time. In 4.01, what you get back is @count. There's a little line in the documentation that says all @odata preferences may be removed from the answers. So I have had to go through my code changing @odata.count for @count. It's not documented, apart from me telling you, okay? Please tell somebody at Claris that they need to do a better job about versioning some of their things. The very interesting thing is, though, that you can make your Odata queries behave like old school data queries. So if you put this header in your request, max version 4.0, then you'll get, even when querying a 4.01 server, you'll get back an answer in the 4.0 code, okay? So you can kind of fudge around it for the moment. But what that means is we're going to have to do, like we've done in other places, if an integer of the application version is less than this, then you can't do this and you can do this. We're just into that space at the moment until all our servers are fully up to date. And obviously you can't make clients update from 19.6.4 to 21.1 because there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. However, because this is on the server, your 19.6.4 client can take advantage of the stuff that's 4.01 Odata because it's all on the server side, not the client side. And we're going to try for this. I do like living dangerously. I define living dangerously by I drive too fast and I like doing live demos. I have a really simple, so thank you to Fabrice and FM Cloud. He made the suggestion to speakers they could have a quick demo host, and I'll just put my file there, which means I'm not doing it on my live server, and it doesn't matter because that server's going away later. So it doesn't matter if I show you where it is. Got a really simple file that I'm going to use for the tests, and we're going to use Postman. And I need to do a thing where I get out of this, and instead of what I am doing, I need to mirror my screen, don't I, so you can see it. Give me a second. And talk among yourselves. Let me do this so I have, in fact. Sorry, I should have done that before. Is it that one? Let's just see if that works. You can see it anyway for a second. So let's just look at removing the dollars from the query, from the select and filter everywhere, for everything that's got a dollar in front of it. That just helps the Odata parser to know that that's not a field name. So you're clearly not going to call any field filter and any field select and any field top, are you? Because that's like a stupid idea. So if I run that, there we go, bingo, it works. So all I want to know is, does it work? So yes, removing the dollar signs work. So if I take that off there. So I have a simple thing. I have some clients and some projects in this file. So we're going to look at the clients field. And there we go. Because I have said that I want the max version to be 4.0, it's giving me back at odata.count. If I turn that header off, run the query again, it now says at count. Okay? That's just something you need to kind of log away. It can break your code if you are not careful. Oh, this takes ages to... Okay, there we go. So one of the things that we are going to now be able to do is deal with very long numbers. Okay? And a very long number can be the getUUID number. It's a very long number. If you just do anything that tries to transport that number in JSON, then it doesn't work, as you know. So it will get turned into exponential notation when you're trying to do it in a FileMaker thing. If you do it as an Odata thing, it will in fact give you back that number. as apparently a number. But then you can't do a JSON get element on it because it'll go, oh, I can't really cope with that. So one of the things in 4.01 is the ability to cast specific field types as another field type. Okay? This is how it works. I've got a long field here, and if after that you put / EDM is entity data model, dot, that's the type of thing I want. So I can make a long number field pretend to be a string in the answer as it comes back. I can also make it an integer 64. But that's like, I'll show you that working. It's ridiculous because clearly it can't fit that into a 64-bit integer. So it does that with it, so you lose data. But it's a key new thing for getting back answers, but it also works inside our queries, as I will show you. So let's just skip back over. 1, 2, 3. That's really slow. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. You'd think I'd been practiced at presentations in my life before. Postman. Cast as a string. So let's just look at the field. So something that has a number in it like this, so clearly in FileMaker we can store a number that's got 400 digits in it, or 400 before and after the decimal point. And so for accuracy, that may actually be a thing that you want. And because Odata is much more specific about types, we're going to get some problems if we try and bring that back. So I'm going to go, okay, on this project record, get me back a total, which I know is a long number, but as a string, okay? So here's the answer. So here we have something which is stored as a number field in FileMaker returned to us as a string. And therefore, we can do a JSON get element on that at the other end and then convert it back to a number. So we can transport it and then be able to query it later. Okay, happy with that? Let's take the same thing, do the same query, cast that number as an integer 64. Well, clearly I've lost all kinds of data, and of course that makes sense. Don't do things that clearly are ridiculous and expect anything that makes sense. So let's do something else, which is kind of cool. So in this project, I have something which is total, it contains 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a number. In the query, I can cast that total field as a string and then say, does it equal a string comparator? So normally you'd say, hey, is that 2, 3, 4, 5? But in this case, I'm saying, oh, I want that data to be treated as a string, and therefore, is it 2, 3, 4, 5 in speech marks? And here we get back an answer, okay? So as part of what you're kind of asking for, you can say, oh, I know that's a number field, but can I kind of treat it as if it's a string field for the moment in our comparisons? One of the things that is most difficult to deal with Odata, mostly on the going in direction, is working with dates. So one of the first things you should have done as your first Odata thing is get some metadata back. Just tell me what's in the file. And the bit that tells you what the type of the field is, you're going to see things like this. So an edm.datetime offset, an edm.date, or a time of day. So the first one is a timestamp, the second one is a date field, and the third one is a time field. You can use this casting thing to say, oh, can I return a date field as a timestamp? And it does it by adding 0 minutes, 0 hours, 0 seconds to the end of it, but it comes back as a proper timestamp. You can't do it the other way around. You can't say, here's a timestamp, can I just have the date part of it? Just, hey, I don't know why, it just doesn't work. These are the list of file types, of data types that OData says you could return. FileMaker doesn't return all of them, because it so we don't have a Boolean field, we don't have a byte type of field, but in SQL you might. And special to us is how a container is dealt with. It's an EDM.stream. So the point about Odata is it goes, hey, here's how Odata works. You can add other stuff on the top of it. So SAP is essentially Odata. They have stuff that's bespoke to SAP. So that the core is the same, but there are things that are specific. We have to deal with container data, and the engineers are working very hard on making our container interactions better. So potentially you could try and cast anything to one of those and, I don't know, do an experiment, see what happens. I know I did. So let's just really quickly do the next exam. Come on. You can do it. I know you can do it. So the next thing is I've got a field which has a date in it, and I want to make it into the timestamp by making it a date time offset. So there we go. So I'm not just telling you in a presentation, it does work. Okay, but it's just adding 0, 0, 0. So you get full kind of timestamp. So in the case where you're interacting with other web APIs, and we've written custom functions to do all kinds of cleverness with taking dates and turning it into a timestamp in the right format because somebody over there needs it as a proper Z, proper Unix Z, whatever. Well, we can be doing that as part of our query and not have to be using custom functions to do that. Everybody following so far? We're not falling asleep. Excellent. So you'll notice I am using the talk to a specific record using this format. So that UID is the primary key of the record. I'm going to talk about that in a little tiny bit. If I want, so instead of so the one way of doing it is, hey, I want to cast something, specific cast statement, and that's it in a query. But if you just put /EDM int64, that's the equivalent of saying, could you give me that back as this? Okay. In the same way that if you put $value at the end, it will just give you back the raw value, not in JSON format, which we can show in a bit. Next big thing. Parameterization. There's a big word. Can you spell it? That's where you go and learn about it on the learn.microsoft. Obviously, this presentation is basically, it's available, but the version that you can currently download is not quite this version. I'll make sure that the new one is, so you've got the links. That's where to read about it in the Microsoft documentation learning. Parameters can appear anywhere in your query, prefaced by an @ symbol. Okay? Theoretically, in keys, functions, in selects and filters. Now, it doesn't fully work in all of those places at the moment, I believe. But the kind of pseudocode would be, okay, instead of putting here a UUID of the primary key, I'm just putting it as a parameter. And then at the end of my statement, I'm saying, oh, that's what this parameter is. Now, that feels like, maybe there's no sense in doing that when you're just using it in one place, because you're just kind of making your code slightly weird. But it's like like we do with SQL queries, we put question marks in to protect from injection, and let FileMaker kind of deal with the data types. But it does become more interesting if you need to use the same thing twice or more times in a query. So let's go, okay, so we're going to filter this thing by, is the total less than some parameter, and that parameter is in fact 50. Okay, again, that's just like a one-off, but that's how it works. But if we do it with in more than one place, let's look at projects where the total's less than 50 and the cost is also less than 50. Okay, so we're using the same value twice in our query. So that's where parameters may start to kind of help us. again, because it's in the standard, if other people are writing their queries in that way, it means they can be writing queries against our FileMaker data in a way that makes sense to them. And also, in the middle of this magic, we can filter where the total is less than that parameter multiplied by 2, 100, and the cost is less than that parameter. So find records where the total is less than 100, but the cost is less than 50. So where we've made lots and lots of money, okay? Which introduces us to mathematical operators. So we've been used to string operators, EQ, LE, equals, less than. We can now use mathematical operators in what we're doing. And these are they. And this is your homework for the evening. I will be asking questions at lunch on who can remember what those are. Okay, those are the things that we can use. So Odata is like learning some other foreign language. You just have to know what the words are and where to put them in a sentence. It doesn't necessarily mean you understand the language fully. You can't get let loose in a shopping centre, but you can at least ask where are the toilets and where's the station, okay? Which is the first two things that we all learn in every other language, yeah. Interestingly, I said this in Rome the other week, because I was travelling and working, the first proper word I learnt in Italian was cacciavite, which is the word for a screwdriver, okay? Let's see if we can have a really quick... well, the point is, it's a combination of ODBC and SQL, but done in a web string. So the mentality is, can we do queries that sort of mix and match the best of both? So if you have done a lot of SQL, this should be, oh, all right, okay, I can work out maybe how to do that. So here's just the very, it works. I've put a parameter where the UID was and made the UID into a parameter. So all we want to know is, hey, does that work? Yes, it absolutely does. Can I filter by that? Hey, here's that, where the cost is equal to, in this case, 90, and there's an answer, okay? So here's the point, it works, okay? The question now is, so what do we want to do with it? Because now we have the ability to do this, what should we be doing? And I can't answer that question for you. And breathe. Next thing is about nesting. So we have, till now, been writing some queries really longhand for how we get to things. Again, like a simple sentence, you can now nest inside a select. So this is kind of the future, so this is the new way we want to consider writing some of our queries. So I want to select projects from this client, but I want to filter the projects where the unique ID equals this, okay? So that's, obviously we can read that in English, but we're nesting the filter inside the select. If we do this, let's have clients and we'll filter the clients by this and we select projects. I wonder what we think we're going to get back. Just bear that in mind for a second, because we're going to see what we get back. But here's the other way around. So the top one is nesting a filter inside a select. The bottom one is nesting a select inside a filter. So we're going to select the clients where the company is this and it's filtered like this. And we're going to expand the projects, but what we want to get back is just the description out of the projects. So clearly what we used to have to do, and in cross joins you'd be using the / notation, so it's like /projects / description or something. This enables us to write our queries in a different kind of way. We're saying, oh, the select is, this is what I want back, and I don't have to write the full path thing to it. So let's just look at a couple of those really quickly and see how we're doing on time. maybe this is a sign it's time to update my Mac for something a lot newer. Although clearly that's just any random excuse, isn't it? So here's a query which I'm going to read out, which kind of does that. So from the clients, I want to select a field called data long, so irrelevant, but I also want to select something from the projects. So previously our select, we've assumed that a select is some fields in the table. So we have a kind of comma-separated string of field names. Here, I want a field, but I also want something from the projects that are linked to this record. And what I want is the description, and the filter is based on, this is what the key ID of the client is. So what we get back is the field, the data long, and something from the projects. But we don't get back data from the projects. We get back, let me scroll across, a navigation link to the thing that you think you asked for. So one of the things to understand about how Odata is working is it's a navigation protocol. How do I get from here to the thing that you're looking for? So that's a kind of fundamental thing about, so we have a different model of the way that we run queries on related things in FileMaker, because FileMaker says, if that's related, you can have it in a portal. But in Odata, it doesn't have that concept, but it does at least go, you asked me for both the field and something about the project where this is true. So I'll give you how to get to the project information, okay? So you'd be kind of going, if that's the query that you're running and you're running a website, then you can do that. But you have to do a second query using that other string to get to that other piece of data. It's not going to go, here's this field from here and this field from here, using that type of query. The way you do that is with an expand, where you kind of go, actually I want to include these specific parts of the answers. That kind of means that something else that we're about to look at is to do with what are we expecting back from the things that we can do. So that we can, and this is linked with, we can now use references, which in this world is $ref. Now, if you have already done any work with the Microsoft Graph API, so dealing with groups and members for Azure groups, you'll be familiar with this concept. Because it's saying, I want to do this thing with this thing that's is a reference to something else, and you pass it the thing as a reference. But we can now use that in FileMaker. So if I just say, hey, get me the clients, get me this client, get all their projects, but actually just give me back a reference to the projects, what we are going to get back is exactly that. It's not give me everything about all of the projects for this client. It's saying, hey, give me a reference to it, please. So you might, in this particular case, you might get back for this client, you might get in your value an array of navigation links. So things that start at ideas, how to get to the things that are in there. So you'd have some kind of looping mechanism that says, hey, how many links are there? Now follow that link and do some other kind of query in it, rather than just trying to bundle up all the data. So this kind of response is very fast, because it's just saying, there's a thing there, and that's how to get to it. I'm not going off and grabbing all the data and bringing it back. It's just, here's how to get there. It's up to you to decide what you now do with it. So like I say, it's used in Microsoft Graph. When you want to add a user into a group, and particularly when you want to delete a user from the group. And the note in their documentation says, please make sure that you pass a referenced object, because if you don't pass a referenced object, you'll actually delete the group, not the member from the group. Okay? Clearly, people have done that in the past, and there must be a load of help cases about it, but they're not changing what they're doing. So that's just like from practice, kind of warning thing. We'll show that in a second. Top. behaves differently under two different circumstances. Okay? So you may be, and this is I think this is a different behavior in 4.01 as well. If you say, here's a filter, find me all the records, count how many there are, but bring me back none of them. So that's a good old SQL trick, isn't it? Find how many, but don't actually bring any back, but still tell me what the count was. So that was a way of working out how many how many things. In the days when our data was metered, that was a smart way of not having lots of data coming back to us. However, definitely in 4.01, top returns two different answers. I'm going to show it to you. So if we say, how many are there, but just bring me back the top one, the count will bring me back a count of the found set, not the count of just the record you asked for. It's like a filter on a portal. So we know that a filtered portal has all the records in it, but just show me the one. So that's why they can be really inefficient when there's 10,000 records in the portal and you're using a massive calculation to filter it down to just the one, which people may or may not have done. If you do top equals, and that's supposed to say 0, the count returns 0, not the found set. So you can't now use that as a quick trick to find how many there are by not returning any data. But now our data's not metered, it's fine, because we can just return 1 anyway and get the found count. That's a change in behavior. And something quick about large sets. It is kind of in the Claris documentation, but we don't always read that because it's not the easiest thing in the world to read, is it? No, John. Returned data sets are limited to 10,000 maximum in one go. This is hard. So each OData server implementation decides what its maximum page size to return is. So some systems go, the maximum number of records you could get back is 2,000. In FileMaker, it's 10,000. It's called server-side paging. You can't get back more than 10,000 records by any method, and believe me, I have tried. But what you do get back in the answer, in the header, is a next link with a skip token. So I was doing a bit of work with somebody who worked for Honza just recently about, they got somebody who's got like 40,000 records they want to read into Power BI. What's the best way to kind of do this? So first of all, if you include the count in your first query, then you know how many records in total match the filter. And therefore, if that number is more than 10,000, you do know that you're going to get back something at the top part above the data where all the at links are, something that contains another thing, which is a skip token that you're going to have to kind of get and add to your query, or just pull out that query and replace the query. And so it loops through in bunches of up to 10,000 if you don't do anything else to modify that. And so you would do, so the way to do that is to go, give me back this answer and give me back the top 10,000 would be a way to kind of limit that. And then give me back this and the top 10,000. It's just going to give you the 10,000 anyway. But there's another way to modify the number of records you get back using the prefer, so this is a header, prefer OData max page size, and you can set that to whatever you want, and then not do a give me back the top. So that says, give me back this answer in chunks of 1,500. Because there's a balance between give me back the maximum number that you can get, and it's like a massive load of records that takes a while to come back, and give me back a smaller answer, and I'm just going to deal with paging the results. Okay, so that may be if you're using a web paradigm, it says, well, let's start by loading this data, and while that data's loading, I'll go off and do another query to get the next lot of data, because you can't possibly show that many records in any kind of list on any kind of screen that makes any kind of remote sense to you, does it? But it could even be like a next button to get the next chunk of records. So that's a way of speeding up and minimizing the response of of what you're getting back. So I've tested, there's no difference between doing a less than 10,000 records request by doing the header version of it or by doing $top. So just give me back the top 1,500. There appears to be no speed difference between the two. So you're not going to gain by one. It's just a kind of programming mentality. So let's do a really quick, hey, let's look at that. See how we're doing. Hey, fine. Might even get to questions. So here's the previous thing that said, hey, give me back the projects /reference. This is a reference to the project for that client. It's not any data from it, but you could then go, okay, if I want to load that separately, so you might not be wanting to do that in your FileMaker solution, but somebody who's looking at a web solution may go, okay, I do know there's two linked things, and here's a button to get the first one, and here's a button to get the second one into a new kind of portal space, okay? There are two ways to do a count. You can include, so I've talked a lot about you do $count equals true as part of your query. But if in the navigation string, you do /count, so here's a thing /$count before you do the query, it actually does the same thing. It's just a different way of writing the same query. But in this case, what I've got back is the count of projects where the description in the project is the word Billy. So, so it hasn't given me back a JSON object because I've said just give me the count. Okay? So if you're looking for something that says, hey, does this exist? Here's a really quick way to do it, because you don't have to pass any JSON from the returned result. You just go, it's either like 0, 1, 500. It's just a number. If you use $value on a specific field, you will just get the value of the field, not in JSON. So again, there may be reasons why, if you're looking for a unique ID in a record, if you use $value on this query thing on a specific field, you'll just get it back, which means you don't have to do any JSON parsing. Let's look at those in a second. So here's the lots of record. There is a table with like 15,000+ records. So in this lots of records table, I want to select a particular field which has a random number in it, and I want to count them, and I want to get just the first 1,500. So if I scroll down to the bottom, I will see that, do it this way because it's quicker. So in the navigation link, it's record 1,500 is so that's a serial ID, but it's created as a unique ID. That's how to get to that record. So it's showing that I have in fact got 1,500 records. I've got the records from 1 to 1,500. But the count says how many have matched the filter. Okay? So I said, how many records match? Give me back this count, but only give me top 1,500. And therefore, in this particular case, I'm kind of using the two things. But I'm not getting back a skip link here because of the way I've written the query. All I've done is go, hey, how many are in this? But just give me the top 1,500. Let's, because that thing's just beeps, let's just quickly dive on. And pause. Oh, now, the best for last, isn't it? Massive. In is now supported. So we've had to write queries like, find me the project where the description equals this, or the description equals this, or the description equals this, or the description equals this. And the problem with that is there is a limit to how long that URL string can be. So if that is containing half a sentence every time you're doing a query, that's like a really, well, it's a bad, don't do it. Okay, that's the first thing. But now in is supported. So the filter can, so it's like a SQL in, where this is in this, and we give it a list of IDs in SQL. So the filter can now take a comma-separated list of possible values for the filter. Makes it really simple to write that query because we can get the values we're looking at, turn it into a comma list, drop it in the middle. So it would look something like filter the projects where the description is in Billy or Bertie, which will work in here. So that line is now defunct. It's here, now, today. You can start to use it. Yay! Only if your client server is 21.1. Harold. So to do that, you have to do it the long way. Oh, so this is saying where this field is in this list of values. Okay, so you have to supply the whole value. So you can't use it with a in but start. You can't combine it with a starts with. So you can't use in to find starts with A, B, C and starts with D, E, F. What you're supplying in the in is a whole known value. So there's some projects here that have Billy and Bertie and some other things in them. So, because we want to see the magic, here's a query. Filter those projects where it's in Billy, Bertie, or Big Red. There we go. Thank you. I've got back 3 projects. I do happen to think that is completely massive for changing. I've been bleating on about it, shall we say, for quite a while, going, at the very least, when we get there, you have to be supporting that, because it's going to radically change how we can write our things. A couple of other quick things you might not have ever considered doing. You can address something by 2 primary key fields in the same query. Now, I don't know why you might do that, although I can see a use case for it, where somebody's supplying part of the data and you're supplying the other part as a way of gaining access to a record. So this works. So if you're filtering the projects, so normally you'd go filter projects by single quote UID, single quote, close brackets. But here, this works. Filter the projects where the unique ID is this ID and some other key is some other value as well. And that can be, so with legacy systems, people have ticked the button to make something unique, and therefore a record can have 4 or 5, apparently, key fields. That works. It does not work if one of those field names is called ID. You can do filter the projects by escape ID. I have discovered that anytime you tell FileMaker developers stop calling your fields ID, their heads explode and people get very angry very quickly and very opinionated. Sometimes it's fun, obviously. I said before, if you just do, hey, for this project, get the name field, but just give me back the value, you'll get back the value as a string, not as a piece of JSON. There may be some smart things you can do with that. And the count brings you back just the count. So, hey, that's good. Things that are not yet implemented in 4.01, because they've kind of reached the bottom tier of the ladder. And please, speak to, if any of these are on your list of, that would be fantastic. Speak to your favorite client, your favorite contact at Claris, please, to make this happen. Not going to talk about how and why it works. Dollar compute, being able to compute a value on the fly. So it's like when you do a SQL thing that says have this as this. And obviously that compute could be where the total and the value is this as some other variable internally, and then filter on that. Not supported at the moment. For me, I think a big one, there's a preference header, which says omit values equals null. So wouldn't it be nice if when you query a table with 400 fields in it, most of which you know are empty, you don't get back a data set that includes the 400 fields, but only the ones that are populated. Because that's a way to skinny down how much data is being transported. Omit nulls is in the spec, not supported. Oh, I think another massive one is the support for JSON batch At the moment, we have to write a batch like we write a multi-part email with boundaries, and it's all in text, and you have to calculate the question to then put the content length in, and it's frankly a nightmare, and not many people are doing it because it's quite hard work. And it's one of the only places where we're transporting parts of what we're doing not in JSON. So and it's in the specification, it's definitely there. So if we got the engineers to make us be able to create the batch in JSON and transport it, it means everything's then JSON. And we can stop fiddling around with boundaries. That would be brilliant. That's where to find out about it if you want to read it before you speak to somebody. And other headers are not supported, if match and if non-match. That will enable us to do upserting. So upserting is the concept of if this does exist, update it, and if it doesn't exist, insert it. So it's a portmanteau word. We've combined insert and update. They're not supported, but that would be really cool. That would be a cool way if somebody accidentally deletes a record and you need to put something onto the record. If you try and put it on the record and it doesn't exist, then what we could be doing is creating the record to insert the data and then backfill with other stuff. So we can't do filter the clients where the count of the project equals 2. That is in the spec. Can't do it at the moment. Would love to. And we also can't use one of the first things that people look at is kind of, oh, you could do this thing. So where I've do dollar value or dollar count, dollar expand is in the spec. So just give me this thing, but just expand it for me. Give me back everything without me having to do a select. Not supported. Would love it to be. And a thing called deep updating. Being able to, because obviously we work in a relational database, we understand the relational concept, being able to update children as part of one thing in one go. So being able to create or update a record, but create its children in one go, but not as a batch. Since the last time I've stood up in public, some of the things I'm using all the time with Odata inside FileMaker is I work with student data, people give me a spreadsheet, multiple columns. Those columns need to end up in a particular part of the data structure, but it doesn't contain the ID that I would get back if I created the record. So I'm writing an Odata script. Say, okay, take the first bit of the data, make the record, get the unique ID back. Oh, now take the 10th to the 12th columns, create a child record, but I've already got the unique ID, which now can be the parent ID. And I've been doing that where it's like 4 and 5 children level deep, because the structure is not defined by me, it's defined by the government. But now I've written that script, and somebody gives me that spreadsheet next year, click that button, bingo, it all works. Okay? I think it's worth investigating. And the other area I've been doing a lot of work with is, because I'm a big fan of Otto as well, using inbound webhooks. I have a customer that uses jot forms extensively. So they've added webhooks to the form, which then post the data into a receiver file, which runs a script, and the script can just say, oh, okay, you need to package up this. Can I just see if this form has been resubmitted? By which I'm doing a Odata query that says, does it exist? Does a count of more than 0? And in which case I can update these bits of fields, and if not, just go off and make the record. But also make the children record. We want to make a person, but the address is in another table, the phone number's in another table, the email's in another table. Easy to do in an Odata script. So I'm using it extensively. But I go back to the first point I made. It's not just about what I can do with it. We've opened up FileMaker to the outside world. So we do have 6 minutes for questions. Hope that wasn't too fast. Thank you. Obviously happy to talk tech stuff outside, just grab me or whatever. But any questions right now? Let me change my glasses so I can see you. Yes.
I've got 3 questions.
Okay, one at a time.
The easy one, the 15K limit.
10,000K limit.
Limit, that's per records regardless of the number of fields you've got on the table.
Yes, so the question is, when you query for a thing, how many records can you get back? And the max is 10,000. It's the number of fields. You can have 800 fields in those 10,000 records, or you can have one field in those 10,000 records. Because the point is, you're also saying, in the select, what do I want back? So you can have a massive data set or a small data set times 10,000. But the 10,000 is the number of records, maximum of records. Number 2.
I'll skip one, just because other people
So,
have asked.
and skip equals 1. That's a no. Yes.
That's performance issue, right? So if you try to do the casting not after selecting a specific ID and casting as a string, that might be fine. But if you try filter casting as a string, I assume that it needs to look at all the data to cast it as a string and then return you what you asked for. So
Yes, I didn't say it was. So this was about, does it slow things down if you cast something as part of your filter because it's got to cast all the records before it can do the filter? Well, of course, that makes sense. I didn't say it was perfect. And so here we have a situation like, I did a presentation years ago about card windows at DevCon, just after they'd been introduced. And in the same way that in FileMaker 12, everybody's layouts for about 3 years had popovers on them because it was like the new magic tool. Suddenly we had card windows everywhere, and they are fantastic. But it's not, if your toolbox just has a hammer in it, that old thing, if you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Odata is not, so you have to test. What is the difference between doing this? Build yourself some tests and say, do I care about the time difference? Now, if we're talking milliseconds, the answer is probably, no. But if you're doing it on 10,000 records and it slows it down to 15 seconds, then maybe you do care about it. So maybe don't do it. But that's you as a developer need to get into a mentality that says, just because John's told me I can do it doesn't mean I should. I need to work out what's the right use case. Anybody else? And Chris has got a microphone.
Sorry, didn't expect that. Equally on the top and the large data sets, John.
Yeah.
You mentioned you could use top with equals underscore and used to be a trick for bringing back what you effectively, I assume, is the same as a count.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that when you've got more than the 10,000 maximum, you've got, was it the skip to reference?
Yeah, you get an at next link.
How
So
do you actually manage that? Once you've returned the first set of data, do you always have to use a count first to be able to think, I've got to manage that? Or
my view is yes, because you can say if the count is more than 10,000, I do know I'm getting back a skip link. The alternative is just to go back and look in the data and go, is there a skip link or is there a next link?
So
Okay?
you're checking
So
for
it's
that in
just
advance.
a different way of like approaching. So in the one case, I'm deliberately saying, is this count more than 10,000? Because I know I'm getting something back. Otherwise, I've got to go, is this thing here? And then do I need to deal with it?
Right, thanks. Bro.
Anybody else? Fabrice, go on, you must have a question. Fabrice is going to try and trip me up now. Please do.
No, don't worry. It's not really a technical question. I'm looking with interest at your list of features to implement, and
Yeah.
I have a different one, and I wonder if we could, get organized somehow to communicate better with Claris people, to discuss the order in which things should be implemented, and so.
I agree. I'm absolutely happy to start a thread on the community saying, hey, I've just presented here. And as a result of that, we talked about the things that aren't included. And here's my list. Please feel free to add your list. And then we'll at Clay. So I do happen to know that at this moment in time, Clay is working on the thing that says, oh, data's going to be its own leg. Now might be a really good time to get in and go, could we have this in this order, please? You can't do everything as priority one. So I'm happy to start a thread on the community.
I think it's good
later
if
on
it's
today.
under your name.
Under my name, Jay Renfrew on the community. It'll talk about Odata. Please, even if it's only me and Fabrice, but if the rest of you can go, oh, that would be great, or could you support it, then happy to do that. Anybody else? Yes.
Very quickly, is very similar to the SQL, SQL
Yes.
as in. Does it behave the same where you numerics are just entered and text you have to quote, or is it always within some
So
form
you're
of-
saying where the list of values for this field is in this list. So you're querying against a field. You know whether it's a text, a string field, or a number field. So you're not going to mix and match, because that makes no sense.
No, agreed. Yeah.
Because if you have 2 in that description field, then it's a string. So therefore it's got to be in
So
speech marks.
each individual.
Each individual
member-
item
Yeah.
has to be its type. So if it's a string that you're querying, it's got to be in
Got
single
them.
quotes.
Otherwise
if
it's a
if it's a
numeric.
number, it's just a
Brilliant.
comma-separated list of numbers.
Great.
That just depends on how your data. So if you're using a serial number for your primary key, which happens in invoicing, so find me anything where the invoices are in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2020. So in that list, find me all the things that match that list of things. And that's 10. So yeah, happy to chat in the corridor, but thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.